All right. And we are live, everyone. Hello out there. Welcome to KC Reacts. This is our fourth episode. I'm Kevin Hammer.
And I'm Chris Barrett.
And we decided to do a more lighthearted, show this evening, especially because our last episode was a bit heavy. We all, so we thought we'd do something a little bit lighter this time. And so Chris thought it would be great if we responded to one of Dave Chappelle's skits where he references the insanity that is the LGBT community. So I want to thank Chris for making that suggestion because, well, I'm sure you've all seen it at this point. The fact is he actually did touch on a lot of truths and some not so truths, or things that were once true but aren't true anymore. So while we enjoy this clip from Dave Chappelle's show, we're going to have actually a little bit more of a conversation about how true it is, how applicable it is right now here in 2025. So with
this way, everybody gets to hear two actual gay men talk about this craziness. So, because I'm sure the vast majority of people who saw this, just by nature of the fact that the vast majority of people are straight, didn't get to hear what gay people actually thought about this. And I'll just say, I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
Yeah. Well, we're also going to use this stream as an opportunity later. We're going to, not on this stream, but in the future, we're going to have a stream where we actually delve more into what the left claims is the history of this, of the movement and the quote unquote community. So with that, if we're all ready, we're just going to jump right into it and start watching Dave Chappelle. So let's get into it.
I got friends who are L's, I got friends who are B's, and I got friends who are G's. But the T's hate my fucking guts. And I don't blame them. It's not their fault, it's mine. I can't stop telling jokes about these niggas. You know, you hear all those letters together all the time, LBGT, and you think it's just one big movement. It's not. All those letters are their own movement. They just travel in the same car together. My guess is the G's are driving that car. That makes sense to me, because there's white men in the G's. And these people are trying to get around discrimination and oppression. And you know how white dudes are. We know these roads. In fact, we built these roads.
All right, so I wanted to stop it right there, Chris, because, he touches on a few things right off the bat, right? First of all, he's right. These are separate things. These are not the same. All these letters just crammed together under, well, in this case, in a clown car, they're not the same movement. You had some interlopers, some people take over, hijack the car, which we'll get into in a bit. But specifically what he says in regards to gay white men, so homosexual white men, Chris, is that if you were to listen to any leftist today, right, any queer activist, right, they would basically, you'd come out believing that there were no homosexual men involved at all. Stonewall was
especially not homosexual white men.
No, sure. Especially homosexual white men, absolutely not. There wasn't a single one president, Stonewall, for example, or in any ways, at all. If by their account, by the leftist account, Stonewall was just full of, trans, non-binary, feminine presenting women of color, maybe in wheelchairs even. This is honestly how the leftist reacts. Now, what's interesting, because he talks about these roads, white men built these roads, which when it comes to the community, and this is when we will go into a future stream, it was homosexual white men who built those roads, who built the path, who built the engines that actually moved us forward towards gaining rights such as visitation rights in the hospital, legal protections, right, for our spouses and all that stuff. It was homosexual white men, right? That's just a fact. Chris, I'm going to throw it to you quick.
Yeah, I mean, I might broaden that a little bit further just for the simple fact that it's like it wasn't, at least in my reading of history and looking at all the different pictures and stuff that I've seen
Right.
of the early gay rights movement. I mean, there were certainly black people in there, and so
Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
of course.
I mean, I mean, the only thing is that I would just say it was generally speaking homosexual men that and
Hmm.
regardless of race, who really spearheaded this. I mean, there's always this kind of like interesting dynamic between lesbians and gay men, and we'll get to that here in a second. But definitely when it came to the gay rights movement, I'll agree with you to the extent that I'll say that yes, it was largely homosexual men that led that movement. It wasn't anybody else. It wasn't trans people or anything along those lines. It was homosexual men. That's who led that movement.
Yeah, and no, you're right. Is the reason why I actually reference specifically is that when you look at the financial contributions of that era of the 60s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, the reason I said homosexual white men is because it was homosexual white men that were primarily the organizers in specific ways, which, like I said, we will discuss that in a future stream. But it's, and I only mention that not in a gloating fashion, but in the fact, just to highlight that the left has basically, as they do, rewrite history, right? They are rewriting history. I mean, for crying out loud, we have black female Vikings now in, historical shows. So it's, it's just, it's absolute insanity. So that's why I wanted to touch on that. And you're right, we're about to get to the L because Dave, he let's just watch it. I have to admit, I do love where he goes with this.
The rest of you buckle up. We'll get you to where you want to go. So the G's are just driving the car. Of course, next to the G's in the passenger seat is the L's. Everybody likes the L's, except for the G's. I don't know what that's about. I just know the G's don't like them that much. And the G's always say like little subliminal digs on them. This is unnecessary shit. It's not mean, but you know what I mean? They just be like, I wouldn't wear that. The only thing that breaks the tension between
All right. So just on that a little bit. I mean, well, to be fair, we do know how lesbians dress, right? And no, I'm just kidding. But he does touch on something interesting. So there is a documentary. There's a few. I can only remember the name of the one right off the top of my head. There's a documentary called The Pride Divide. Once again, that's The Pride Divide. Now, what that documentary actually focuses on is the division between homosexual men and homosexual women. And it's actually quite fascinating because for the longest time, it was homosexual men leading the fight for legal protections altogether. It doesn't mean there weren't lesbians there. There weren't homosexual women involved. There absolutely were. But the movement, a lot of that energy came from homosexual men. Now, I've watched a lot of documentaries on this and even spoken to people who were alive during that time who lived through this era. And in their opinion, part of the division comes from two things. One, the first thing was the AIDS crisis. The AIDS crisis pretty much wiped out an entire generation of homosexual men, right? And even in the one documentary, I think it is The Pride Divide, there is a lesbian and she states this. She goes, ironically enough, lesbians probably wouldn't have gotten a voice in the movement if it wasn't for the AIDS crisis. And now I want to give lesbians their credit with this is because when gay men were suffering from HIV/AIDS, lesbians were there supporting them, tending to them, especially when a lot of those homosexual men didn't have family to help them out because sometimes even couples were sick. Now, there's a little bit from what I've listened to, from what I've heard, is that a lot of people feel that there's a little bit of a resentment there of the lesbians towards gay men, is that they turn them back into nurturers and mother roles, right? Now, I think one of the issues on the gay male part is the fact that when lesbians did take over from that moment, when lesbians did, because keep in mind, it was once GLBT, by the way, it was not LGBT. That is actually a fact. It was more on the West Coast where you had the GLBT. It was on the East Coast where you ended up with LGBT taking over. And I think part of also, and this is actually a little bit of grab for me, is the insertion of feminism, right? Because once feminism, especially modern feminism, gets inserted, you have this whole toxic male BS, toxic masculinity BS inserted, and all that stuff into the community as well. So, Chris, I know I've been yammering for a moment. What's your take on that?
Well, first of all, I'm fine with LGB. Forget the T. You know how I'm with that. Um, I'm fine with LGB because ladies first. I try to be a gentleman. But um, there's a couple things that I think about, like, because he's not sure why there is a little bit of tension there sometimes. I know from my perspective that, if there is any credence to there being some sort of patriarchy in this country and maybe indeed the world, one thing that I have seen is that the idea of two women being together has always, at least in my mind, and from what I've heard bunches of straight men talk about, that seems somehow acceptable to us to an extent, you know. But the idea of two men being together, that is like totally taboo around the
Mm,
world. And so but that's not to say that lesbians have it necessarily easier than we do, in any sense. It just means that they have kind of flown under the radar a little bit more than gay men have. Um, However, you did touch on this. See, I have a great affinity for lesbians. Um, so, as funny as it is what Dave said, um, I actually can't say that I do dislike them in any sort of way. I mean, I've had lots of great lesbian friends, and um, I mean, the thing is I think that you were talking about the thing during the AIDS crisis. I remembered, because I am old enough to remember this. I remember lesbians, going out of their way to take care of their gay brothers and
mhm,
that sort of thing, and donating blood and things like that. And so, I mean, whatever divide that there may have been, it certainly was bridged during that time. So yeah, while maybe gay men kind of led the initial charge, when we, uh, I don't know, the way I see it is when we fell down because of a health crisis that happened within our community, the lesbians took up the charge. And then when gay men kind of recuperated, and I mean, I'm talking in very general sense here. Obviously there's individual situations might be different, but when gay men recuperated, I think we kind of unified a lot more, and we so I think as gay men we actually should be very appreciative of our lesbian sisters because I think the when times are going to be tough, they're going to be there for us, and I hope that they know that when if times get tough for them for whatever reason, we're going to be there for them. I mean, I certainly know that I will, and I know that you will be as well, Kevin. Um, so yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on that. So I mean, what Dave said was funny, But I kind of have to disagree
Mm.
because, yeah, there's a few weird gay men out there that are kind of like, ew,
Yeah.
lesbians.
And
But, I mean, the vast majority of us, I really don't think feel that way.
And let me clarify, it's not even necessarily a hatred. What I was speaking to is attentions or tensions between it. Because to reference that documentary, which I still recommend, I actually think it's from the 90s. So it's before all the woke crazy in the community. Um there's a lesbian in it who says that she believes that the only thing that homosexual men and homosexual women have in common is that they're attracted to the same sex. that there was a feel about that. So I want us in the future to do a longer stream specifically on this topic, the tensions between homosexual men and homosexual women. But also, to the lesbians' credit, while there was that tension, during that time, one of the other things was the issues that were being focused on, right? I think men and women, we are different, right? And that is highlighted very amazingly, or at least it was highlighted very well among homosexuals, right? We are at least we used to be, and I think we still are, the walking, breathing, living proof of just how different the sexes are, right? We aren't, our
Meaning
existence doesn't
homosexual men and women, right?
homosexual men and women. We
Right.
highlight just how different the sexes are. We
Sure.
highlight that, despite what the community says, despite what the woke culture now says, and I honestly, sorry, this actually does get me on rants because this is something that I've had a great deal of discussions in with homosexual men, homosexual women, with activists, with historians, with all this stuff. I've had a great deal of engagement about that, which is why I think in the future I would love for us to do a more in-depth, and let's bring on a lesbian or two to have that discussion. But I do want
Oh,
to
yeah.
quickly, before we move forward, I want to jump to the comments because we have so many amazing people watching right now. We of course have Vinny. Thank you once again for for coming on, Vinny. It's great to see you, and we will have you on in the future. We're going to do an episode with you for sure. I can't wait for that. We have a Jess that said hi. We have Stacy. Who right off the bat said there were no lesbians as well, according to those historians. Right? There were only trans women.
Oh, right,
Generally
right.
trans women of color.
And that's
No
it. That
act.
that is something that kind of like ticks me off, is because to a certain degree, lesbians were written out of the history in favor of trans women. That's just gross.
Yeah. And on Facebook, which we have some people as well, we have Larry, who's watching. So that just came up as watching. Looking for the comments here. Christy. Hello, Christy. Oh, thank you. She says that she is loving this content from us. Thank you so much. And yeah, so with that, we're actually going to continue with Dave Chappelle here because he's done the G, he's done the L, he's about to get to the B, and then we're going to get into the real crazy.
The L's and G's are the B's in the back seat. That's right. There you go. Everybody scream out when you hear your letter. There's one thing that the L's and the G's agree on is that the B's are fucking gross. They seem greedy to the L's and the G's. You know what I mean? They're just sitting in the back seat like, yeah, man, I'll fuck anybody in this car. What's going on, man? And sitting next to the B's, all the way in the back seat by themselves, looking out the window. That's the T's.
All right. So let's get to those bees, right? The birds and the bees. Now, all right. So I don't know about you, Chris, because here's the thing. I know that he does have a bit of truth. He speaks a bit of truth there, as there has been this long history of looking at people who say they are bisexual a certain way as greedy and all that, right? For me, though, I've always tried to think of it a bit more logically, understanding that as a homosexual man, I am solely attracted to other men, right? And I understand that heterosexual men are solely attracted to women. Therefore, logic dictates that there would then, if I exist as a homosexual man, and a heterosexual man exists, then logic dictates that there are those who experience sexual attraction towards both sexes. I just think about it from a logical perspective. But he is right that there has been a great deal of that that hate, that hate over time. Chris, I'm gonna just throw it to you quick.
Sure. Yeah. Well, okay. So as we were talking about before the show started, so the interesting thing about bisexuals, and maybe why there is a little bit of tension between gay people and bisexuals, is according to the most recent U.S. census data, most bisexuals end up in heterosexual relationships. Now, that's fine. Whatever. They like to visit for a little bit on the same sex thing and then get the hell out. Uh sure. Whatever. You go right ahead and do you. But, that's why I like to jokingly call them straight with extra steps. I'm not saying that's true of every bisexual because obviously we both know bisexuals who aren't that way. But the vast majority of them are. And maybe that causes a little bit of tension because, gay people are kind of like, are you really kind of like us or not? And I think that that's kind of where some of that stuff comes from. And I will say, back in what was it, year 2000, I think it was, I was a member of HRC. And this is when HRC was starting to already try to build the alphabet mafia, the LGBTQIA plus.
Mhm.
Before, at that time, it was just the L and G, and that was it. And anyway, they sent out um, basically kind of like a poll of their members via mail. Of course, it was 2000, so they did it via mail. And it wasn't even a fundraising thing. They just wanted to know what their members thought about including the B. Well, at that time, I I've got to shamefully admit, I said no, do not include them. Because I was like, they really aren't exactly like us, and I just sort of, just sort of intuitively knew, just from seeing the bisexuals that I had already interacted with, it's like, well, they're going to end up in straight relationships. So, their concerns are just not the same as ours.
Mhm.
Um, but, as I grew older and got to know a lot more, many more bisexual people, my opinion on that changed. And so, the thing is like, when it gets down to it, we, regardless of the L, G, or B, we are all people who experience same-sex attraction to some degree.
Mhm.
And so I think that is the thing that kind of ties us together, regardless if the vast majority of bisexuals do end up in heterosexual relationships. They to that degree they kind of do understand us. And so yeah, my opinion has changed on it. So again, it's like
Yeah.
it's like I think what Dave said is funny, but I kind of have to disagree because it's like I really am not like, oh, they're disgusting.
Yeah, no, I think it's not disgust. I don't think there so much was the disgust. At least even back when I was younger, and there was a lot more animosity towards people who said they are bisexual, who would identify as bisexual. It wasn't a disgust. It was the greedy argument that I think is a more common thing. So I have to say that I disagree with Dave Chappelle on that as well. It's not about disgust. It's about this idea of being greedy. And it's funny because you said straight with extra steps. Now, in my mind, I always apply straight with extra steps when you have a trans man and a trans woman in a relationship. That's straight with extra steps, right? When you have
Well, it is. I mean,
when,
both are maybe.
when you have when you have a so-called trans woman wanting to date an actual woman, that's straight with extra steps. But it's in my mind. Now, what I always joke and I say is that with bisexuality, it's more like tourists, right, coming to an area, visiting a place they enjoy for a short time, not a long time. Although I do wanna say one thing that I actually found very interesting in my own personal experience, because I've known a number of bisexual men and women in my life. Now, I know you referenced that study, but in my own experience, most of the bisexual women I knew wound up with men, like in that study, that research you mentioned. But in my experience, almost all the bisexual men I knew also wound up with men. So that's just like on a personal experience, right? I have no study. I'm just saying I've always found that amusing, at the end of the day. But I do want to jump to the comments quick before we move on to the teas, because that's when we're getting crazy. Vinny made a comment here that actually does touch on part of this as well. I think part of that resentment, part of the feelings there towards bisexuals. Vinny comments, I have had gays tell me that because I'm bi, I have an escape horse back into heterosexuality in case times get rough for gay people. I disagree. And I want to touch on that a little bit too, because here's one thing I actually getting to know more bisexual people. Now, I know some bisexual people that just straight up identify as homosexual if they're in a relationship, right, with someone of the same sex. And here's why. Because having those conversations, they said that they've kind of, especially from family sometimes, family that doesn't agree with their lifestyle, right, with being with someone of the same sex, when they've said that they're bisexual, they've been told by those individuals, well, since you're bisexual, just date the opposite sex, right? They say that as well. Then it should be easy for you to not take part in homosexuality. Since you are bisexual, you can just have sexual relations with the opposite sex. So I did want to touch on that, because Vinny, I think you brought up a good point there.
Yeah, I like what Vinny brought up. Now, I will say, even to this day, and Vinny, let me know what you think, but I just ran across a person who was talking about that they, believed in marriage between a man and a woman only. And I looked at the person's profile, and sure enough, they were bisexual. And my very first reaction to that was, yeah, sure, you don't care about same sex marriage because you have an out. You have another option. So it is kind of what you're talking about. It's like that. Let me put it this way, Vinny. I would not approach a bisexual person and say something like that because I think generally it's ignorant because I wouldn't just assume that that's, the type of person that they are. But, when I see a bisexual person standing against same-sex marriage, then those feelings do start to come out. It's like, yeah, you have an out, you have another option. So of course you don't care. So I don't know. It's a tricky one, Vinny, for me, at least for
Yeah.
me. And you know, I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, and I think that's definitely, once again, maybe that's what we can have you on to discuss, Vinny, in the future. I know we plan to have you on. Maybe that can be the topic we go with there. But let's move on because we're about to get to the tea, which Dave Chappelle describes as being in the back of the car, which we have some comments on as well. So.
But everyone in the car just feels like the T's are making the trip take longer. Anything the T's say gets on everybody's nerves. And then the T's don't even say anything bad. They should be in the back talking to himself. I'm hot. Shut it. Shut the fuck up, okay? Just roll the window down. You bitch, I don't know what you... Can you pull over at the next exit? I need to use the restroom. There is not a restroom for you for 4 steaks, nigga. Will you just shut the fuck up so we can get where we're going? And just when
All right. So a few things here with Dave Chappelle that, first of all, first thing I agree with is that, yeah, the tea has made things take a lot longer, let's be honest, right? Not only that, I don't just say the T in its current state is making things take longer. It's reversing things. So it's put that car in reverse, unfortunately, and is aimed it toward reverse and then aimed it towards a cliff. However, do I think the T's, I would argue, in what exists of the so-called community today are in the front seat. Although I actually don't even think the T's are driving. I think it's the Q plus that are driving this clown car right now, if I'm going to be honest, right? Because here's what I do recall of the trans individuals I remember from years ago, right? The trans individuals I knew back when I first made ties, connections to the community at that time were very much individuals who just wanted to quietly transition and move on with their lives. They weren't trying to make a fuss of anything. They weren't out there trying to get in women's sports. They were not trying to transition children. All the trans individuals I knew back then believed that any kind of hormones or any kind of transitioning needed to be left until you were an adult, right? That is those were the trans individuals I knew then. Nowadays, at least from what we see, they are few and far between that we actually see the faces of out there. So I have to say that, first of all, the T's are part of the takeover of the so-called community right now. So they're up in the front seat helping to direct that clown car right now. Chris, what do you think?
Well, I definitely agree with you. The T's aren't making the journey longer. They are rolling things back. I mean, we're seeing more and more people questioning the same-sex marriage and stuff like that. And I got into a discussion on X about this. Basically, somebody was talking about, some lawmaker trying to urge the Supreme Court to undo same-sex marriage, and there's been a couple other states that have done that as well, and passed. But I mean, they're non-binding resolutions. They don't really mean anything. It's just grandstanding. So I'm really not all that
So,
concerned about it.
if you don't mind,
But
Chris, I want to insert with that quick, if you don't mind. Just because that would be like me. The way Democrats, the way the left are freaking out about these non-binding resolutions, right? Which happen all the time, by the way, in state governments. Non-binding resolutions are actually quite common, and some of them are insane. We just don't hear about them as much, right? But
right.
then I could argue it's what you have that senator, that Democrat senator, who's trying to push the life at erection bill. Was it?
In Mississippi?
Yeah, in Mississippi. There. Should I take that seriously? No, I know it's a
No.
joke. I know he thinks he's making some profound statement about abortion, which we're not going to get into in this stream, but maybe the future. So, but thing is, should I take that as serious then too? No, I'm not. I'm not going to take a
Right.
resolution seriously. No.
Right. And that's the whole thing. So, but the whole thing was like, oh, look, these rights are getting taken away from the gays. And, you guys, it was directed at people like me. Yeah, and it's like, oh, you guys didn't support trans people, so now look what's happening to you. And it's like, huh. Well, since 2015, which is when same-sex marriage was legalized in this country across all 50 states, basically 9 years passed, and there was no serious push against same-sex marriage. Seriously, there really wasn't. I mean, there were people that didn't like it, and maybe there were, maybe there was a resolution or something passed here and there, but certainly nothing that gained any sort of attention or traction. Now, 9 years later, 10 years later, now that it's 2025, we're seeing a little bit of that. And it's like, huh, I wonder what happened during that time. Oh, yeah, transmania took off. And unfortunately, the transgender community has such a parasitic relationship with the gay community. And because of that, And the left is totally responsible for this. They're the ones who really allowed this to happen. And every leftist gay person also is responsible for this too. They allowed that connection to be made. And it was a connection that was made in hell. Honestly, it
Mm,
should have never been made. Because we don't have anything in common. What they're talking about is gender identity and changing their sex and all this type of stuff. All we're talking about is same-sex attraction. It's
mhm,
not even remotely the same. But the thing is so I would definitely I would put in the passenger seat at the front of the car the T's. Now, here's where I might get a little bit of pushback. Here's who I think is really driving the clown car now. That's woke straight white people.
mhm. Yeah, I see where you're coming to that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And the thing is, I think that they are ultimately driving the clown car. Um, they love to feel better about themselves because they're
Mhm.
doing something for some sort of minority community or whatever the case may be.
It's all for them. It's
And
for the pride. Funny enough.
yes, yes, exactly. And let's look at the population of just even gay people and trans people in this country. It's minuscule compared to the rest of the
Mhm.
population. Yet billions, literally billions of dollars are pumped in to the LGBTQIA plus charities every year.
Well,
Well, that's not coming from gay people and trans people
yeah,
only. So guess who else is paying for this stuff?
yeah, and
That's why I put the woke straight people, particularly the
yeah.
white ones, but forget the
Well,
race. Who
you have
cares?
a
Who
point
cares about the
there.
race? But let's say woke straight people, they're in the driver's seat of the clown car at this point.
I say they are definitely there in the car. I think they're sitting on someone's lap for sure. They probably are holding the map currently. And because let's face it, in an era where you're being a minority, being a victim is currency, heterosexual white individuals, especially upper middle class, which I think we're talking about upper middle class, suburban and urban white kids who often have everything covered by mommy and daddy for the most part and that kind of stuff, right? They're bored, but they know that victimhood is currency right now. I'm glad we're seeing that decline. I want to see it go away altogether. But right now, victimhood is still currency, right? So you have these these heterosexual white suburban kids, wealthy kids, trying to attach themselves as much as possible to it for their own, pride, their own self worth. Because I want to touch on that a bit more after we get through with the Q, though, because Chris, I want to know if you agree with one of my personal perspectives there. But I do want to jump to Vinny because Vinny did respond, by the way. I do want to cover that. He responded to you, Chris. He goes, I'm for gay marriage. Everybody is different. I can't be held responsible for what 1 or 50 bi people said. So,
Well, no, and Vinny, I understand that. Please don't misunderstand me. I know. I'm just saying. I was just using that as an example for where, the feelings that Kevin was describing can be evoked from within me. It's not how I walk around in my everyday life feeling about bisexual people. So please understand that.
yeah.
I'm just saying that, if, because Kevin had mentioned something about like, there being this kind of idea of bisexuals having a way out. Generally, I don't think of it that way. But I was just giving an example of one issue where I was like, oh, yeah, I guess I kind of do feel that way.
Mm,
And that's all I was doing, Vinny. So please,
mm.
please, please, no offense to you. No, none intended
Well,
whatsoever.
he responded, it's cool. It's all love and hugs. So there we go. There we go. All right. So Now, with that, we're gonna move on to the Q, and I personally, so the Q is where I feel that Dave Chappelle captures it the best. With the creepiness, I'm just gonna say it, but
It's true.
let's
It's
hop
so
to it.
true.
And by the way, people, I apologize if there's a bit of a lag between the audio and the video. I swear that was not popping up earlier when I tested the video. I don't know why it's doing it now. I'm seeing it. Let me know if you are. Either way, I want to acknowledge that and apologize for that. But here we go. So we are getting to the cue.
That car can't get any more tense. The Q's are a hitchhiker that they pick up on the road. Some white dude in booty shorts is walking down the freeway. G's see him. That guy might be one of us. Hey, are you okay? Need some help? And he come over there with them booty shorts leaning on the window. Hey, what's going on, fellas? Lady? Whatever pronoun makes you feel comfortable in the back. Yeah. I don't really know where I'm going. I don't know if I'm gay or I'm straight or whatever. All I know for sure is that I really want to get in this car.
Right there, that face, like that is the perfect. And I'm just gonna go back to this. So that to me is like the perfect right there embodiment of the creepiness that we have going on. Now, Chris, let me know if you agree with me here, because this is honestly, we've talked about how there's this explosion of LGBT identifying individuals, right? Especially among youth, right? Now, here's what I've noticed personally, and let me know if you agree with this. Once again, this isn't something that I've researched. It's just something I've observed. Where you see the increase isn't with the lesbians, the gays, or even the people that identify as bisexual. Where you see the increase of identity, of claiming identity, is with the T's and the Q's, and especially the Q's. There's a stream out there, there's a video out there of a woman going to Pride and asking everyone how they identify. 95% of them identify as queer. 95, and here's why, right? To be a homosexual, right, is if you're going to identify as a homosexual, what's expected of you if you're identifying as a homosexual? What's expected of you?
Well, yeah, you actually have to be with someone of the
Yeah.
same sex,
If you have
romantically
same sex,
interested. Yeah.
yes. If you're someone with same sex attraction, it's expected that you're at least going to show, even for a bisexual person, you're going to show an attraction towards the same sex, right? So there's an expectation there for the lesbians, the gays, and the bisexuals. Even a little bit for the trans, right? If you identify as trans, there's an expectation to move it along and progress, right? Surgeries, all that stuff, which I know you and I disagree with, and we'll cover that in more depth in the future, of course. But what obligation is there with Q, with queer, other than to dye your hair a weird color and maybe get some piercings? There isn't. Anyone can just say they're queer, and now they're that minority demographic. They got the victim points. So I actually think the majority of people, especially who identify as queer, quote unquote queer, are actually heterosexual people just looking for victimhood points. That's my personal opinion on it. That's my take on the Q when it comes to the so-called community. What's your take on the Q?
Dude, I actually don't disagree. With pretty much anything you said. Maybe the only thing that I would disagree with is I do think that you can easily identify into the T as well.
Oh yeah, no.
Uh,
I'm just saying. I think queer is even more common than the T
oh,
now. That's
no,
what I meant by that.
sure. No, I'm just saying that I think both of them. I guess that's where I was going. It's like I think both things are things that you can just say I am, because I mean
Mm,
we've seen from the trans side we've seen plenty of so-called trans women who have beards and stuff
yeah.
like that. And they put absolutely no effort into looking like a woman. So that's what I'm kind of talking about there. But with the Q. That is definitely more problematic to me because, yeah, these polls showing the rapid increase of LGBTQ identifying people, it is definitely among the T and the Q. And I guess that's why I was getting at the thing about the T, because it's like both of these are things that you can just choose to be,
Right.
and there's really no requirement. I mean,
Mhm.
certainly the trans community is willing to accept the women with beards, and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And the cues, I mean, really, when it gets down to it, I 100% agree with you. The vast majority of them are straight. I mean, I have I have and they'll call themselves queer, and then I mean, you've probably seen this like on social media and stuff, like the videos of the women, especially women, for whatever reason.
Oh,
I don't
yeah.
know why this is, but especially women, who call themselves queer, and then they're trying to convince her husband or boyfriend that now they're in a queer
Oh,
relationship.
yeah, I know that. And my
And
heart, sorry, that angered me a bit because I actually have met a couple of those men. I've known a couple of those men, and it was my heart went out to them because they were in relationships with women that they loved, women that they actually had plans for a future, kids, all that stuff. Then suddenly their wife or their girlfriend, and actually two of them were married, and it's suddenly the woman in their life is, well, now I'm not a woman anymore, so you're in a queer relationship. No, he's
right.
not.
So, the most common thing that I've seen as far as queer is concerned is, especially women, but definitely some men as well. So I don't want to sound like I'm blaming only women, but
Mhm.
I have definitely seen where basically a woman claims that she's non-binary, or a man claims that he's non-binary. But there was someone of the opposite sex, so we know that's a heterosexual relationship. So that's
Mhm.
why I go back to saying these are mostly straight people. And because they have claimed that they're non binary, then they're suddenly in a queer relationship.
Yeah.
And, I mean, to me, as a gay man, and I'm sure it's true for you as well, Kevin, that's so offensive. Not only are you using a slur against gay people to identify yourself, but then you're making a mockery of
Mhm.
homosexuality by saying that they're just because you've changed how you want to call yourself is somehow or other equivalent to an innate feeling inside ourselves. you know Excuse me, guys, but fuck
Yeah,
you.
and I mean, to be honest, though, that's another thing is the word itself, right? I mean, I'm not quite of that generation that I experienced it in the same fashion, but I did grow up country, so that kind of did have a bit of it there. But there was, I know, when I've talked to older gay men from the '70s and the '80s, they reference often in school the game called Smear the Queer. So it was it, the a harassment game, usually in a locker room or a bathroom, getting punched, their heads put in toilets. And I've met multiple homosexual men who went through these experiences. And so that's queer. Now, some people are like, well, reclaiming words. I'm personally, come on now. But yeah, so I have to say, in regards earlier though, Chris, because I do want to touch on this, when I referenced the T, right? And how there's a bit more commitment there than with the Q. I have to say, I think for me, I was referencing in my mind the trans individuals I knew that I described earlier. The individuals who just wanted to quietly transition to look as much as possible like the sex they were trying to present themselves as, who didn't believe in transitioning children, indoctrinating children, castrating children, all that crap, right? They didn't believe in that. I think I'm speaking of those individuals when I say that there was an expectation there. But you're right. Here in 2025, there isn't that same expectation, even with the T. And you actually then you hear, and this drives me the most insane. I need to know if you how you feel about this. When I hear someone say that they are non-binary and trans, how the heck are you, if non-binary is neither, there's no binary, and trans, you transition from one state to another. How the the cognitive dissonance in the head, like honestly, that's why I believe the mental illness is there. And to your earlier point when you said you weren't sure why in reference to women, especially with young women and young girls, we know that social contagions grip them a lot faster and a lot harder. We see that with young girls because in general, young girls are more social in that way, right? Generally, you'll see more often with young girls when their female friends buy something or have something or are a fan of something, they will flock, right? I mean, it's a stereotype for a reason. Women going to the bathroom together, women doing all this stuff. There's a bit more of that mentality in women than I think there is in men. So that's why I think we see mostly women. Because even with trans, do you know actually back in the day it was primarily men who suffered from gender dysphoria?
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
primarily men. Now women are far outpacing that. And I honestly believe it's because women historically, especially young women and girls, are more susceptible to social contagions.
Well, and it really does make sense that it was primarily men who were suffering from gender dysphoria way back when, because the vast majority of them, I mean, let's face it, I mean, at least all the transsexuals that I've known are essentially gay men, you know.
Hmm.
And so they were gay men who felt bad about themselves to some degree. I mean, at least this is my theory. They felt bad about themselves, and they felt by turning themselves into a woman, they were fixing themselves, so to speak, and turning themselves into straight people, because now I'm a woman who likes men, I'm straight. Of course, we know that that's, a complete fallacy, or I mean, completely irrational. But, I mean, if you're in a situation where you feel that, I don't know, kind of pressure or whatever, it kind of makes sense to a certain degree. Um so it makes sense that it was mostly men because as I was alluding to beforehand, when it comes to the societal pressure, I really do kind of feel like lesbians sort of flew under the radar. So they didn't get that type of pressure that the men did. And so, the men were more likely to go to extreme lengths to change themselves. That said, things have changed. You know, this isn't 20 or 30
Yeah.
years ago. And now we've got this whole new thing where, girls who are feeling bad about themselves because of puberty or whatever the case may be. Maybe they're lesbians because I mean, certainly some of them are, and lesbians are a lot more high profile than they used to be, like I said,
Hmm.
20 or 30 years ago. And, now they are facing some of the same pressures, but I really think honestly, when it gets down to it, the main thing as far as social contagion is concerned, that is kind of like the underlying factor of all of this. And I hate to say it because we're a part of it, but it's social media,
Oh yeah.
and
Oh, without
and
question.
yeah, and so because of social media, kids are allowed to see ideas and stuff that parents would probably never ever approve of their kids seeing. So, I mean, honestly, we've got a bill here in Missouri that's going to ban students from being able to use their cell phones in schools, and I think the only exception is like emergency calls or something like that, but those can be made to the school that, it doesn't need to go directly to the kid's cell phone. And anyway, I can see some problems with that, but at the same time, I managed to go through almost my entire school career up until ninth, not ninth grade, but 12th grade, to without a cell phone. manage to do that. I think that these kids can probably manage to do the same, you know. So they probably don't need that shit in schools, and so keep them off of there. Now, the other thing is, well, what are you going to do when they're at home? Well, obviously, that's where parents need to step in and be like, No, little junior, you're not going to use your cell phone to get on social media. And in fact, I'm going to block all of that stuff. I mean, my recommendation, honestly, after everything that I've gone through over the past few years, learning about how all this stuff works, my recommendation to anyone out there who is a parent, get your kids the hell off of social media
Oh
altogether.
yeah,
Shut
and
down their accounts. Keep them
and
off of it.
communicate
Yeah,
with your child.
right.
Uh,
And make sure that you do communicate. Exactly, like you're saying. So, I mean, I'm not a parent, but if I was, there is no way in hell I would let my kid on social media until they turned 18.
hmm.
Period.
So, Chris, because I mean, you make a valid point there with social media, but and that does build off of what I was saying about the social contagion, especially with young women and girls, because we have to address this and we have to address it quickly, because I know we have right now, right? We have an administration that is more about protecting children, women, and young girls, right? From these dangerous policies and ideologies. But pendulums swing, of course. So we need something much more permanent, right? I did get a notification. I hadn't had a chance to check it yet. That the Senate did vote, and of course, all the Democrats voted to not protect women and young girls when it comes to sports and locker rooms and all that, which we will cover that in another stream. I actually got an update a moment ago about it.
That's
So
so shocking.
yeah, I mean it's shocking, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
sarcasm wise, if you
so
didn't
I guess
catch
where I
that.
want to go with this now, though, is to go to the so-called community in general, because we've discussed each individual letter and what it means. And Chris, you and I have had this discussion many times. One area where I've conflicted, even with many of the people who happen to be homosexual, bisexual, heck, sometimes even some trans individuals who have criticized the so-called community, is they preach about wanting to take the community back, wanting to take the community back. All right, this is just my opinion. The so-called community, in my mind, it's a cancer. There's a cancer that has spread to the blood, the bones, the brain, and I don't see anything worth saving in the so-called community that exists right now. To me, that clown car that Dave Chappelle referenced, right? Not only, I said earlier, they're driving it towards the cliff. No, I believe they've driven it off the cliff, right? They are Thelma and Louise heading towards the damn ground. I don't want to be in that car. I don't want to be part of that community. I'm a homosexual man that's living with my husband and living my own life. I'm not part of a community anymore, right? Yes, do I have a connection with other homosexuals and joke and laugh and stuff about things that are seem funnier to the demographic with other homosexual men especially, and have those conversations? Yes, all right. But as far as a community and pride flags flying and all that crap, no, I don't think that can be saved. I'm not trying to reclaim that. Like I said, that cancer has spread to the bones in the brain, and I want nothing to do with it.
Hey, I get your point of view. I mean, maybe my only disagreement is I think that there is a community among gay people, particularly. Now, the TQ plus IA or the TQIA plus, that's a totally separate thing. I really don't
Yeah.
think that is really a part of the community. Um, but I mean, but we kind of like have our own communities within the community, if that makes sense. And the thing is, I mean, how we met Kevin, really, when you think about it, it's because we were gay conservatives. And so, I mean, while we don't really identify, and this is where I agree with you, the larger gay community, we don't agree with that. And we don't like it because we think that they have driven over the cliff. But we've also formed our own little community, which is kind of like gay conservatives, and that's why we know all the different people that we know. And
Mhm.
I mean, it's not saying that, I wouldn't be friends with, a heterosexual conservative, because obviously I am. I'm told, that isn't a requirement for friendship for me, what your sexual orientation is. I couldn't give a shit less. But um but I think the thing that, did help us have some common ground, it's like, oh, you're gay? Really? And you're
Well,
conservative? Oh my
no,
gosh. And so, I mean, there is that little
yeah,
commonality there that sort of kind of brings us together in a certain way. So I
yeah,
do think that there is a gay community that exists. There's the larger gay community, which is, batshit crazy for the most part.
yeah.
And I'm like you, I don't want to be in that freaking clown car either. But there are kind of like sub communities of that, and one of them are, the gay conservatives, and or gay MAGA, or what, however you want to phrase it. And I think that those are folks that I do feel a sense of community with, because I feel like we're all kind of trying to work towards the same thing.
Yeah. So
And the cool thing about it is generally speaking, and for anybody out there watching, chances are us gay conservatives or us gay MAGA guys, or women, are probably very likely to agree with most of the heterosexuals out there.
mm.
So we are not someone to be feared.
And so, Chris, I guess one thing I want to acknowledge and just speak to is that as a species, mankind is very tribal. We are tribal. We seek our own. That's why in the family unit, right? The city, the town, the tribe, right? Now, really bad things can come from that when you're too tribal, right? I mean, you have obviously that's where you get a lot of racism, sexism, like a lot of like truly vile things will come from that. Wanting to destroy other cultures and that kind of stuff, right? You can get a lot of hatred from that, but there's also a beautiful thing that comes from that, like brotherhoods and sisterhoods, right? I support there being a Boy Scouts, not Scouts of America, Boy Scouts, just like I support there being a Girl Scout. So tribalism to a degree is healthy, especially in certain developmental stages. I do now to take that and apply it here is, let me be more specific. Do I enjoy having friendships with other homosexual men? I do. Conservative homosexual men specifically is where I tend to, or non-political, or not as political, or putting it to the side. So I guess when I reference the community, the reason I think the quote unquote community, the movement, what has existed, right, is dead, because I don't see that being turning back. Plus, I don't want from it what I once did take part in. I don't need a pride flag. I don't need the freaking Walmart to have pride flags in June. I don't need all that crap. So I guess that's what I mean when I say I don't want anything to do with the community, is I don't want anything to do with the cancer it's become, but I also don't even want anything to do with the other stuff that I once did do. I used to wear the pride, like not the progress crap, hell no, the original pride flag colors, right? The ones that were most well known up until 5 seconds ago. I had a necklace with that, right? There was a time when it probably would have been a pride flag hanging, right? Or I'd have a little pride flag at a pride parade and stuff like that. In the parade itself, I don't need that. I don't want that. I think that has become so infected. And first of all, I also believe that it's not even needed anymore. So that's, I think, what I mean when I say that I have no desire to reclaim the community. I have desire for community, but not that crap.
Oh, I totally agree with you. Okay, so that's great that you clarified that because and maybe it gives me a chance to also kind of clarify my position because actually I don't disagree with you. And I'll tell you what, Kevin, to be quite honest, ever since I was younger, and I'm talking early 20s, I rejected a lot of the so-called gay community shit because I just thought it was absurd. Here in Kansas City, we had gay restaurants, gay bars, of course, and that sort of stuff. And, I just, I remember this guy that I was dating. It's like, oh, let's go to this gay restaurant. And I'm like, why? And it just it all seemed absurd because it was like, why are we sitting here trying to cut ourselves off from the rest of society? Isn't it going to help us more if we actually like put ourselves out there a little bit? But instead it goes back to something that you were saying earlier. It's like this perpetual victimhood, and they were already into that. So yes, to that extent, the larger so-called gay community, I kind of reject it as well. I mean, I don't give it, I have never actually worn a pride flag. The only thing that I have close to it, and it was done ironically, is I have a shirt that has KC with a heart on it, and it's in pride colors. But I got that to wear to protest. It's not like a serious thing. But
Yeah,
the thing is and if you look at my recent protest with the Gays Against Groomers, sure enough, I'm wearing that shirt. But excuse me. Um, but I thought all of that stuff was silly from a very early age. I mean, the only things that I cared about was like, marriage equality, protections in the workplace, and that sort of stuff. That's all I cared about. I mean, the larger community, I always thought was kind of absurd, and I really didn't agree with it. But yes, as humans, we do form smaller communities, and I think that homosexual conservatives have formed their own community. And I think that you and I are kind of proof of that. That said, the larger so called gay community has become so corrupted, and I'm glad that I never flew a pride flag or wore pride colors or anything because I just never cared about that shit. It was just not a thing for me. Even when I was on the left, I thought it was kind of silly, you know, um,
you mean
because that wasn't.
you weren't farting glitter and rainbows when you were?
No, I'll tell you what, I never farted one bit of glitter or a rainbow, but it's just that I just could never agree with it,
Yeah,
and because I just didn't want to separate myself from the rest of society like that, and that's how I saw
absolutely.
it. It was like a separatist movement of some sorts, and I was like, no, I'm not down with this. This is stupid. I want to be a functioning member of society.
Hmm. And absolutely, and and it's funny because I come from I perspective, a background where I was much more involved. Right, I interned. I didn't just volunteer. I interned at a local pride center. I marched on Washington D.C. I marched outside my capital. I helped organize pride events locally. I helped, direct the traffic and stuff like that when I was help do a lot of different things when I was involved back in the day. So maybe that's also, I think, part of it for me is I was involved during a time when we weren't discussing putting children on puberty blockers, mutilating them, and hormones and stuff, right? That wasn't a conversation. At least not if it did come up, it was a fringe element, and you told them to shut up, right? I wasn't I wasn't involved during a time when we were talking about men competing against women, invading female spaces, right? I wasn't involved during that time. So I think the fact that I was involved during a time before the absolute insanity, it makes me, to a degree, all the more I just want it gone and dead, because I saw something that I was passionate about, something I did love, get corrupted and twisted and poisoned, and it disgusts me to my core. So I just want it gone. So I think that may be a little bit of what's behind it for me, because I can't be connected to that anymore. We do have a few comments quick, and then we're gonna wrap this up because we are at about an hour and 10 minutes. So thank everyone who's stuck in there with us. I know it's difficult to hear two homos go on and ramble. So just quick, Vinny quickly had commented, Chris, that the law, that law is not going to work these days, Chris. Teenagers are so smart that they'll find ways to bring phones in schools and be on social media. They did this law in my high school 10 years ago, and apparently it didn't work out because he has a laughy face. I think, though, it's also more going to come from parents, and because they have the fear of in case of emergency. So you're dealing with parents, what if there is a school shooting? What if there is a situation and they are calling their child, being like, okay, if my child answers their cell phone, that means my child's alive. If my child posts to social media during this moment, that means they're alive. So I think that's going to be part of it.
Just to be clear, Vinny, I'm not necessarily saying that I support it. I think that I was getting at the fact that I understand the reasoning behind it. Let's put it that way.
Absolutely. Stacy also is commenting, I fart glitter and rainbows and fluffy clouds and sunshine all day long. Does that also include the thunderstorms and the hurricanes? So and then Stacy also commented, I was a founding leader in the Pride org, at my previous employer. I watched it spiral out of control with the T+ insanity take over. Yeah. Stacy also commented, parents are pushing for cameras in the classroom. I actually do wholeheartedly support that.
That actually makes a little bit of sense. I know the teachers unions are against it, but
especially these days, because they won't be able to talk about transitioning youth and how little 6-year-old Tommy is actually Tammy.
Yeah, it's a way to kind of hold the teachers accountable. So, I mean, the way I see it is, most employers surveil their employees to some degree,
Mm-hmm.
And so, hey, so you're getting surveilled, to make sure that you're doing your job correctly, boo-hoo.
Yeah. And furthermore, it's similar to why I actually am a strong proponent of body cams for police officers, right? I feel like it protects everyone involved, right? It protects the police officer from being accused of doing something that they didn't towards a civilian. And it also then, the opposite way, right? If a police officer does do something, the body cam footage, the cameras in the car, all that stuff can prove that the police officer was in the wrong. And the same thing with the schools, right? If a student says something happened, right? If a student says that a teacher did something, the camera will show whether or not the teacher did. It will either, protect the kid, will show that the kid is telling the truth, or, prove that the teacher is innocent, and vice versa. A teacher says a kid acted up in a certain way in the classroom, and that's why they handled it a certain way. They had to restrain even a kid who went violent and just started, swinging and stuff. A camera in the classroom will protect that teacher didn't start it with the kid, right? So I full-heartedly support cameras in the classroom, even if they are primarily focused, let's say, on the teacher's desk and the upfront board, right? I very much support cameras in the classroom, absolutely. But with that, before we yammer on too much, because we're almost at 1:15. Chris, do you have any final comments on this stream? It's been a great one. And Dave Chappelle has certainly led us down a path a rabbit hole in a clown car. Any final thoughts on it, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, really, when it gets down to it, guys, I mean, it's the LGB. That's what it is. The TQIA plus, they can, go away. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not going to speak for Kevin, but I think that is definitely the LGB. And I think that you'll find that the LGB probably has a lot more in common with mainstream society than you would expect. And it's the TQIA plus that are kind of like the antisocial people, so to speak. And I'm not saying that every single one of them are, but I'm just saying as a group, that's what they seem to be. So, I think the faster that we can separate ourselves, meaning the LGB, from the TQIA plus, the better off we're going to be, for sure.
Absolutely. And with that, I guess we're done for this show. Thank y'all to those who have commented, who have watched, especially those who have engaged and gone back and forth. We love that. And Chris, what do you think in the future that we do a stream where it's just us responding to questions from the audience? I think that would be fun.
That would be kind of fun.
I think that would be fun. And of course, we'll make a post for social media asking for, some questions to start off with, and then just, take questions from the stream as we go. I think that would be fun because we really want to make this a stream where we're engaging with you, right?
Yeah,
Chris and I aren't
absolutely
here, just to talk to each other. We're here to have a dialogue with you. So with that in mind, y'all have a great evening. God bless. And we look forward to catching you next time. And don't forget to like and share and, of course, subscribe on YouTube because we have a lot more to come. Peace out, y'all.
Take care, guys.